Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunities. I was saying to a couple of people here earlier this afternoon to be in this spot. Last year I was in that spot over there, being a mentor to a team, and I'll just talk to that briefly soon. Of course, the first thing I did, as you probably did as a group, was to read through the brief and get a sense of the brief, and I've looked at the brief over the last couple of weeks preparing for today, and it looks as challenging as the one that we had last year. Interestingly, for today, what I'm going to do is for us to move back and forward about twice. So there's a couple of things I'd like for you to do in a group. We're going to go on a little bit of a journey in those two sessions, and then we're going to culminate today with a special surprise guest who I'm going to bring along, who will give you a very real insight into what I'm going to talk about today around, you know, fashioning a compelling business case and then actually taking that to market. Now, I know many of you have got different roles inside your organisations, but our guest presenter, who I spoke to earlier today as well, really wants to talk to you. It doesn't matter whether you're inside an organisation or whether you're indeed running your own business. I think having a mind open to new ideas and new ways of doing things and collaborating is a great characteristic or skill to have going forward. I certainly wish it was something that I was more open to when I began my career, and certainly in business it's sometimes those oblique, unexpected collaborations or collisions that allow you to get that change. And you probably, as many of you would be working in conditions where you have got not much tolerance, or the tolerances are set, or you're working to standards, or you're working to schedules or tight timelines. Sometimes just having the mindset when you're in that situation to be able to respond or see an opportunity is valuable. I thought before I started as well, thanks for reading out that biography that I wrote and sent to you, like all of us do when we get these things. But I wanted to qualify myself. How can I talk to a group such as this? Well, I've said I've been here and done that with you. I've been there. I'm also of a certain age. I'm old, so I've made a number of errors, and I think I've learnt from some of them, and now I'm trying to pass it on to my 23-year-old, 20-year-old and 17-year-old children, and they don't seem to be listening, but you watch people make errors. So I've got that. I've got an education, so I've been through processes and systems to have an education. I started life in sport and then PE and then into bureaucracy and into the private sector. I came to business quite late in my life and enjoyed some success, but all of that brought challenges as well. And I'm now working with people. As I sent you an email and you've got some attachments to look at, what I've been doing for the last 4 years is just working with people. It could be a reasonably straightforward business, or it could be a business, that's all right, or it could be a business or a concept that's quite sophisticated. And in all of that, I guess what I've learnt is sitting with people for hours and hours and hours and listening, how do I get this idea, this concept, this minimum viable product or this project, how do I get it to market? And I guess that's what I've been immersed in and what we've been doing at the Business Centre increasingly over the last few years. So, does that make sense? So we're going to look at the business model canvas, which you should now all be aware of as a good methodology. We're going to be doing some activity on that. I've set up for the 4 teams an envelope, a big A1 sheet in 4 different areas, and there's some stuff inside there that you'll be working on. Please don't write on the A1 sheets, just use the post-its. That's the methodology we use with the business model canvas, and we'll go from there. Are there any questions or any insights at the start that from the emails I sent you, or anything that on the setup that I've given you so far? No? Okay. Let's make a start then. So I'm going to get to some theory. I like theory. I like to work off theory. I like to know where I'm going. I like to know the premise that I'm working off, and that's the process I'll follow with you. I like to put a framework around things, so you've got the business model canvas. There's going to be a second exercise that we're going to use today in the second part, and that's the idea of a value proposition and taking the viewpoint of customer facing or solution facing to the customer, and we'll look at that. I want, through the business model canvas, having been through this as you guys have been through so far, I think it's a good methodology for you to play with to get on the same page. I note with regards to your project that we're rapidly getting closer to the point where you're going to have to present I see that you've got 36 days left to get your 20-page project report done. I note that 14 days after that, you're going to have your submission crystallised into that pitch document, and I note one day after that, you're up in front of an audience and the judges who you're pitching your idea to. So your future in this project is rapidly approaching. And then, as I said, I hope I can give you an insight into a compelling business case at the end. Let's set the scene initially. This is probably the people's favourite last year, Wayne. My team was a people's favourite, but we didn't quite get there. But thank you. You've got that in regards to me. I want to use a methodology to be a bit nuanced. And have you heard of this concept of how designers will, before they put pathways into a lot of places now, a lot of you council people, urban design, before they put the infrastructure in, they'll let the human beings show you the best way to get to places. So that's not a bad idea to adopt with your project brief. Don't rush in without thinking about the interaction. We're patently aware where we are that we're currently under a policy environment that's encouraging innovation, infrastructure, technology, industries, regionalisation, funding, taxation system. It's very well geared at the moment for change, and I don't think that necessarily will change when you guys get forward to 2037. You're going to have the same political environment, you're going to have the same behaviours around policy, you're going to have the same geography and connections. But I just wanted to point out at the moment, we are putting down a lot of bedrock, I think, which is setting the country up for some good opportunities going forward. But at the same time, I think we all have to realise this isn't the first time we've been through a process of destructive creation. And Schumpeter is an economist, a Harvard economist born in Austria, who is seen as the father of innovation. And the reason I'm concentrating on innovation is because in your brief you are being asked to be innovative. And when I look at the description of what you've been asked to do, you've been asked to be innovative, creative, set up a design. Yes, it needs some underpinning principles and a premise that sits behind it or under it. But I want us to be aware of some of the thinking around innovation. Innovation, disruption is going to be in there in 2037, as it has been now, and but it's been here before. We often have had periods of disruption, and this is a great book that I read quite a few years ago now. It shows from my old air ticket that's in there from 2010, but there's a great example here of, think about when radio was introduced. A simple radio was introduced to our world. And at that time, 1925 in America, was the dawn of the commercial radio industry. And it was all about local little tiny radio stations. And they burst out everywhere. What does that remind you of? Something that started small and got quick, very big. What do we use now? Mobile phones. What else? What do we use? What drives that? When do you want to do a search or something? The internet, right? So imagine the massive change that was. But guess what? At that time, the miraculous ability of radio to reach millions, that had never happened before then. But you know, right at the time that occurred in 1925, there was one problem. Nobody had any idea how to pay for it. So it wasn't monetised. So when you look at what Schumpeter's saying here about taking the early rents on innovation, not long after this, probably 40, 50 years after that, what came along next? Similar area, but another form of media, TV. So all I want you to be aware of, and what I want to set up for this exercise, this 2037 exercise that you guys are under, is that there are always opportunities to take rent with innovation. That is, take the early rent, take the early money. But whatever your idea is that you come up with, that you present to the judges, who are your primary customers in this exercise, ultimately for a customer that will be the community or the economy or the industry that you're pitching to, I want you to be conscious of the idea that whatever you come up with, doesn't matter whether you need to make 50 million to make your money back on your idea or 5 million for this idea or this project that you're going to come up with, you need one paying customer to start with. So whatever this idea or this project is that you come up with, it ain't worth nothing, and you're not going to get the money back if you can't get to one customer or user first. So I think it's a useful exercise, and the canvas is a good way for everyone to be on the same page about what is your customer segment, what is your value proposition that's coherent amongst the group, and what are the channels to get there, what are the costs, what are the revenues that you see. Now, this is a business model, Canvas. I know that some of you, having worked on these projects, will be looking at a project that might not be as easy to define as that, but I just want to use this as a methodology so that we can sharpen up your project so that when you get to the point of presenting it, at least we've got 9 similar fundamental principles on the canvas so we can talk to each other. What are we talking about when we say cost? What are we talking about when we say a customer segment or a channel? You know, or resources. What is it that we mean by that? So there will be opportunities in the future. It's your goal, it's your task in this project to think forward about what that might mean. This is the Australian Chief Economist. Every year in Australia, it might be of use to you as well, every year the Chief Economist's office puts out a report on the Australian innovation system and has been doing so since 2010. A hint, or something you might want to think about, is someone in the group, or some of you in the group, might want to go to that last report, the 2016 report, and see what it's saying about the future. Because that's probably only 3 or 4 major economic cycles away where you guys are heading with your project. And it gives some very good insights and indicators. I think what applies now is just as likely to apply in the future in regards to innovation around business and around industry. And there's some very interesting insights from that report that I find informing about innovation and about how does it happen, how do businesses that want to keep innovating. And I think we had a conversation earlier about acquisitions. Sometimes a lot of corporates, in order to remain innovative and agile and get into new markets, will acquire young, new, up-and-coming businesses, because they will allow an old business which is established and has got low risk in it to be associated with a younger business with some energy, which is more inclined to risk and more agile, to add value to the larger company. Larger companies don't tend to, by nature, to be very innovative unless they're quite deliberate and have a strategy about putting in place mechanisms, policies, procedures, partnerships or joint ventures that allow them to get new markets. You can see there, you know, we want innovating businesses. So what does that mean? And the last few dot points tell you about the sorts of characteristics about an innovating business. Sometimes as well, we had an interesting meeting with some senior New South Wales government officials on Tuesday on the Central Coast. And they've got a fund in New South Wales at the moment called Jobs New South Wales. I think it's worth about $170 million on paper in the budget to create employment in New South Wales, Jobs New South Wales. We had a fairly robust conversation with them about where they thought innovation was going to come from in this state. And because we work on the ground level with it. And their assumption was kind of a conventional one, that is, you know, they think it's going to be like this person's going to arise from nowhere, and we're going to have this unicorn apart, you know, this person's going to come up with the next Facebook or something. That notion still was inside policymakers and senior government officials' heads, whereas what we know on the ground is often many of the innovations, in fact, I think 8 out of 10 are probably going to come from someone that's already in that space, or could be in an industry, and it might be a supplier that can improve a whole device or machine because they supply one component. So sometimes innovation, or most times we find innovation actually comes from places that are not so, you know, we're not going to get the next, you know, Facebook or Airbnb or Airtasker or Uber. You know, they're 1 in a billion. Innovation actually is sitting all around us. So those principles we think are probably more realistic. Now, I need to know Are you sitting in your teams? You're mixed up? Okay. So I've got some photographs sent of you, and I've met about 4 or 5, but it would be okay if I just get a sense of who's in the room, if I could just get your name, and I guess the discipline or the area of work that you've got, just a couple of ticks for each person, just so I've got a sense of who's in the room. I'm assuming, as I rightly should, that all of you are quite comfortable with some of the central concepts and processes associated with planning. We all agree that it's valuable, that it helps. It does help. Does it always work? Things go wrong. Okay. All right. We all agree with planning sometimes things go wrong. Vision. I'm going to show very soon only the first few minutes of a clip from someone called Simon Sinek. Anyone familiar with Simon Sinek? I went down and saw one of his presentations early this year in Sydney. Very clear thinker, gives you absolute precise concepts to help you deal with planning, positioning, and this whole exercise of visioning something. I only want to use that before we go and use the get you to work in your groups and work on the business model canvas. I only want to use that, and I hesitated whether I would use this or not, but having sat there and having been through in my own working life a number of exercises, as some of you have already been through, you've probably been through these vision planning and mission statement and values processes sometimes in business. I thought, no, I think I will play it just to introduce you to it, and it's something I'd like you to think about watching later for your own personal career development, but also for this group and for when you're working on projects and teams. I think having a sense of your why is very useful, and particularly for a group to have a sense of why are we doing this. You know, let's cut through all the what and the how. Why are we doing this? And what you will find with this project, as you'll find often with projects you're involved in, I'm still in touch with the group with which I worked with, and I know that some other people are in touch with the group that the other groups that were part of the process in this project last year. So some of the relationships that you build through this, it's very important, I think, as a group and as an individual to say, why am I doing this? You know, why? What is the essence of this? Because it's those conversations and that depth of conversation that will help, I think, beyond this project, and it's a credit to Hunternet that they put this program together, because it allows you a connection while you're immersed in a project that makes you think about your discipline, but also connects you to business and the community. The premise and the assumption, the methodology of the business model canvas is a helicopter view. It's a GPS view. It's saying, this is complex. Are we going to get stuck on the numbers? Are we going to get stuck on the channel partners or the distribution? Are we going to get stuck on the design? The thing I love about this is it gets everyone on one page, and it's a tool that you can reuse again and again and again. This is the why clip. As I said, I only want to play the first few minutes. He goes into some different layers, but I just want to introduce us to the why part, so that when we go off and do this exercise soon, we've kind of got a sense of that. How clear are you, and I'm just sort of going to get how clear are you with your concepts at the moment with your projects? Are you off and running, or is there still a little bit of movement? Movement, yes? Yeah. There's still some movement? Okay.
We're
all right.
100% clear of 60% of what we're
Fantastic. All right, good. All right, this might help, and it'll be a reference point, perhaps for some of you. And it's very salient, it's very crystal clear about organisations and businesses that don't have a clear sense of why. So we'll give it a go and have a bit of a listen. As I said, I'm not going to play it right through, but I just want to get us started. 3.4 million downloads, this clip. I'm only going to play it to about 6 minutes.
How do you explain when things don't go as we assume? Or better, how do you explain when others are able to achieve things that seem to defy all of the assumptions? For example, Why is Apple so innovative? Year after year after year after year, they're more innovative than all their competition. And yet they're just a computer company. They're just like everyone else. They have the same access to the same talent, the same agencies, the same consultants, the same media. Then why is it that they seem to have something different? Why is it that Martin Luther King led the civil rights movement? He wasn't the only man who suffered in a pre-civil rights America, and he certainly wasn't the only great orator of the day. Why him? And why is it that the Wright brothers were able to figure out controlled powered manned flight when there were certainly other teams who were better qualified, better funded, and they didn't achieve powered manned flight, and the Wright brothers beat them to it? There's something else at play here. About 3.5 years ago, I made a discovery, and this discovery profoundly changed my view on how I thought the world worked, and it even profoundly changed the way in which I operate in it. As it turns out, there's a pattern. As it turns out, all the great and inspiring leaders and organizations in the world, whether it's Apple or Martin Luther King or the Wright brothers, they all think, act, and communicate the exact same way, and it's the complete opposite to everyone else. All I did was codify it. And it's probably the world's simplest idea. I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Yeah. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate it personally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we're better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people...
See what I'm saying? With your project a bit, not defined or defined in some way, that is really useful. Again, I think I got better at the business that I ran last at defining that, at really truly believing what we did, knew that we had the capability and capacity to deliver on it, but hadn't quite shaped it right for the opportunity. And that, I think, is a good methodology. Now, he goes on at about another 10 minutes. It's quite useful. He talks about the Wright brothers. And he talks about the market conditions and the way that those guys were the first ones to discover flight, and that there was another one, which I wasn't aware of, there was another group that was funded quite heavily by the American government, and they weren't the ones that were successful. It was the Wright brothers. So it's an interesting thing to continue to look at. So there's a hook for us to remember. I'm not going to do the SWOT analysis. Now, what I want you to do soon, because I'm conscious of our time, is to go and start working in your groups. You've done some pre-learning with the canvas. I've given you a bit of a thematic approach to that, the why thing, to pull us all together in terms of the concept, and then we've got the framework to work in. I've got two things that perhaps it would be good if we could get a start on today. And then the second exercise that we're going to do is really a hands-on one, where I'm going to ask you to do a particular task, play around with it. We're going to get to a pitch deck, which is what we use. We run a thing called the Regional Incubator Program, where we put groups of organisations or businesses that are close to pitching or looking for equity to grow a business opportunity. And we put them in a pitch environment, and we put them through a 16-week program, with the final part of that program getting them ready for an actual pitch. And the method that we use for that is a standard approach often in pitches in startup communities, which is a 10-card pitch deck. And it forces you to an endpoint through salient and clear aspects of your pitch to get to the ask at the end, which is to say, you know, and for you guys it'll be, our project will do this, and to do that, this is how we're going to do it, and this is what we're going to need to do it. Can you give us that? And that's what the pitch deck will do. Now I'm going to push you on it, you're going to play around with it. I want to see some sort of result at the end, and then the surprise at the end for you is going to be, I think, interesting, and that will be the interesting part at the end, okay? Before we do that though, I'm going to tell you what's in the package, and then I'm going to do a quick little exercise that just to free our thinking up a little bit and our brains about what we assume people think and understand compared to with what's really going on in our minds compared to what others are doing. So I'm going to ask you in the second part of today to play through this value proposition in regards to the example I'm going to give you. Use the example to learn with, but I want you to apply the thinking of it to your own value proposition of your project. So that's that sheet. So we'll need a scribe. The other one is, you may or may not use this today, but I think this is a really useful tool. It's attached to the value proposition thinking about getting succinctly your project very clearly down in words on one page. Now we all know that it's very easy to create detail, and I'm sure you're all going to have capacity to create detail and layers, but this is forcing you all to state the outcome, the value proposition on a one-page format. The value proposition is a tool that's attached to the business model canvas. It pulls it apart on the left and the right-hand side of the canvas, the customer-facing one and the product-facing one, and I've got some key terminology which I've defined in here about, well, some trigger questions for customer jobs, or some trigger questions for what's the pain point or the gain point. So we'll use that approach as well in the second exercise, okay? So we've got some tools to help us through this process. I'm going to be here. I'm happy to use, that's why I'm here, for my time, pick my brain. I'll come around and work with each group. Let's get the juices flowing. But before we start, I'm going to pinch an exercise that I heard once given by a Harvard professor who worked in innovation, that had undergraduate and graduate groups in Harvard and Stanford. A lot of them got this whole startup economy, so as part of their MBA, they'll actually have to start up a business. And this exercise he does with them, because they're smart young things, and they think they know everything, and he tries to get them as a group to understand that not everyone always gets what you think at the same time. So this is the exercise. You've only got to do it in pairs. I'll just describe the exercise to you, and then we'll just do it for about 5 minutes, play around with it, and I want it to be able, for us, I just want us to be able to understand what it demonstrates. Okay. In pairs, I want you to think of a tune that you think is quite well known and that someone would easily recognise. I don't want anyone to sing, just relax. And you're going to have that tune moving around inside your head, because you know it, and you know it's quite familiar, and you're going to expect, quite rightly as you should, that the person next to you will also know this tune that you're playing around in your head. When you play that tune, when I say to start the exercise, one person does it first, then the other person does it. But what I want you to do is I want you to indicate that tune by beating the tune. Not singing it, no words, please. Don't let out any sounds. You just have that song, you know. It could be Midnight Oil or something. It could be something that's familiar to you and you think it's going to be familiar to them because they're the same generation. Or it could be a nursery rhyme. It could be anything. It's something that's easily recognised, and I just want you to tap it out. And then I want the person to see if they can guess that tune. And then I want you to swap around. Play around with that for about just one turn each. Very familiar song. Tap it out. See if there's an understanding. All right, off you go. All right, we'll wind it up there. All right, when you were tapping that song out, did it seem incredibly obvious and they were stupid that they couldn't get it? Or maybe not. With some of the songs, We Will Rock You or something like that, did someone do that? Or Mary Had a Little Lamb or Row, Row, Row the Boat, something like that? Yep. What that indicated to me, and this is again, I pinched this exercise and all credit to the Harvard professor whose name I should remember but can't. That exercise was used to demonstrate to a large group about the fact that you guys have got these projects to do. All of us in our workplaces work on projects, work in teams, or even in business when we're working with people in businesses. They think their idea is so obvious and the gap in the market is so obvious that they really think it should be obvious to everyone else. But it just goes to show maybe we need to communicate things in a way that the market understands, or in a way that people on our project team are more able to understand it, or vice versa. Now, before I get you to move off and start working on your projects, using the why, using the communication piece, starting to use the business model canvas maybe as a frame, as I said, to start teasing your project out a bit, using the principles that you would have seen on it, you know, using the examples about the online airline company, etc. I want you to play with that. Before I do that, I'm going to give you one more example of a business that is happening now that I worked with the last 2 or 3 years that had an idea for a business that it's at the start, and almost every time without exception when I get him to pitch to people, they go, no, that's a silly idea, that won't work. The business is a business called the AdPad. It's run by a young Australian guy who started the business. His name is Daniel Prasad. He's actually going to be sponsoring the support race to supercars that's coming up soon, and his business idea was this. He had an idea that Yellow Pages, right? Yellow Pages is a digital book directory, isn't it? It's made of paper. And about 10 years ago, the Yellow Pages was worth about $1 billion a year. Any business, they get the phone call from Yellow Pages. Do you want to have an ad? Yep, I'll put it in. Okay, full page, half page, you know, quarter page, few lines, how much do you want? Full page ad in the Yellow Pages in the Hunter region, I think is around 31,000, something like that. Half page ad, 14,000 in Melbourne and Sydney, it costs more. Okay, $16 million market now in the Hunter. The Yellow Pages, interestingly, isn't worth as much. But I mean, it isn't worth as much now. It's not worth $1 billion now. It's worth about $400 million a year. That's the income that it generates for census. It's reduced, but guess what? Who still gets the Yellow Pages? Who still gets the Yellow Pages delivered to home? Okay. What do you do with it? Recycle it, put it in the bin. Okay. Maybe put your computer on top of it. Keep a door open. Okay. Guess what? They're still selling it. And why do people still keep putting the ads in, do you think? Why?
They think people are reading them.
They think they're reading it, it's just going to happen. Maybe they think it's going to help with their SEO and get a listing through Google. Maybe. But people are still selling it. So Daniel came up with the idea to say, what if and he did some market testing to start with. He said, what if I created a tablet, an electronic book? And if I said to you, do you want the Yellow Pages or do you want this tablet? What would a person say? I'll have the tablet. All right. The cost of these, the hardware of these has come down a lot since 2009 when Apple invented and put to the market the iPad. But the actual tablet Those you can get them made anywhere, sorry, not anywhere, in a particular factory, but in factories in China. You can get them made. And then the machinery that sits inside them, if you strip that right back to bare functionality, that it's just a CPU and that it's just producing files and you put a SIM card in, Daniel managed to reduce that to a price where he could give it away to people and that the Yellow Pages went on a SIM card. Now it's being trialled at the moment in the Hunter, in that $16 million market. But guess what people said when he took that to market, including me? When he took it to first as a concept, I said, that won't work. People just Google anyway, mate. But when you think about it, if that's the case, why are people still putting ads in the Yellow Pages? He just wants to make money out of that gap in the market. Remember, we go back to the start, to the case, the compelling business case. Do you want that, or do you want a tablet? It's still got some functionalities. He's put games on there, he's put a calendar on there, okay? It's got directory in there, you can save searches, you can put your favourite restaurants in, and it's all there. And guess what it is? It's attractive to the marketplace because it's anti-Google. It's a regional digital directory. Every time a directory gets any traction, Census buys it. They just keep buying them. He's already had a couple of offers to buy his idea, but he's got ahead of the game. He's got ahead of the marketplace because he's already got the design done, he's already written the software and the code, and he's already got it to market. He's selling already, and he's using exactly the same business model as the Yellow Pages. And you know how the Yellow Pages works? Every year they run the Yellow Pages, they just keep ringing up people to say, do you want to go in, do you want to go in, it's closing, and they just keep moving it out until they sell it. It comes out in a window of time. It doesn't come out exactly the same census date every year. So Daniel's applying the same principle. Guess what? It's almost a bit like Harry Potter. He's also saying, I can give you a moving digital ad and you can pay a bit more for that. And so he's got to market a concept, all right, that has got an opportunity because he thought it through. And he thought differently about a marketplace that maybe people thought that's not going to work. But can you see what I'm saying? How he iterated, he designed, he pivoted, he thought about what the opportunity was. So, can I ask then that you guys find a spot? There's 1, 2, 3. There's big spots there. Can I ask you to go and start working on your project? We're going to have I'll give you a bit of a heads up about how long I'll give you to do it. But get to your spots. Play around with your notion, play around with the why, play around with the business model canvas, play around with your project, and I'll come around and work with each group. Okay? I know we don't have a great deal of time, and we actually do a half-day workshop usually on the business model canvas, but I'm hoping that it gives you something to guide what you're doing. And I'm hoping that some of the brief insights that I had working with you gave you a sense of how to use it as a tool, and particularly some of the rules of what to do when you use it. No orphan tasks. Be very clear about your customer segment or your value proposition or vice versa, but be attuned to that, and then how you can use each of every other aspect of it to maybe codify what you're doing for this project. Now very soon I'm going to set you another challenge. I'm going to very quickly go through the principles of the value proposition, and all that is simply doing is it's breaking the business model canvas down into two parts. One, the customer side, and two, the product or the service or the segment, that segment. It's sort of looking at each other. And if you think about the example I gave you about Daniel and his device, the AdPad, and you look at some of the paperwork that I've given you there about pain points and gain, what are the jobs that AdPad does, and what pain does it take away for the customer, and what does the product do to give gain? I think that thinking again will just switch your brain on a little bit in your project about coming up with an innovative solution to a complex project. So the exercise, and I'm not giving you much time at all, deliberately, and I am going to ask you briefly to give us a very brief report about what your insights are onto the case study I've given you. What would you do if you had to create an app in this scenario? And I'm only going to give you about a minute to report back, and then our special guest, who'll introduce himself after I've introduced him to the group, will perhaps tell you a little bit more about their insight into your case study. Okay? Does that make sense? Now, before we start though, I'm going to just give you some of my insights into the project and some of the things that I've picked up from in using a business model canvas approach to the project. So I've gone through all of the sections, and I just want to, you may or may not want to take notes, but these are some of the things I picked up on. The first section, 1.1, talks about Newcastle's overview and history. I think some of the advantages I see there, if I was building a customer segment or a value proposition, would be the straight out factors of us having a regional corridor. We've got regional advantage in this region. I think that's something I'd be looking at. Given the past and future debate that we had last Friday, I'd certainly be looking at the underpinning DNA of this region, the past capacity of this region, the history, the infrastructure that already sits here. I'd also look at the natural advantages. That's what I'd certainly be looking at that. There's talk there about BHP. Remember the benefits of BHP? You're obviously a lot younger than I was then, but my father was, I like to call him the last Boilermaker. He worked at the Cinder plant. He was the last Boilermaker employed at BHP. And that forced structural disruption and cultural change to the Hunter is with us now. It's provided a legacy, so I wouldn't dismiss that. I think we've also, with the downturn in the mining, we've proven as an economy and as a region that we can respond to global markets. We can change the way we produce. We can collaborate through businesses working together. We've got a great, and through collaboration, things like Hunter Valley Coal Chain, what a great example, or Port Waratah Coal, or some of those collaborations. We've got a diversified economy. Structurally, I don't think in 20 years there's going to be a big move away from that. Some of that capacity is still going to be there. I'd be looking at that. In regards to infrastructure and development, we've got world-class facilities here already. We've got a world-class education system, and we've got growth. The project brief, I was just looking at it in 2037, I'll be 75. Some of you here might be 50 or 40, I don't know how old you are. And just like we said at the start, Wayne and I were talking about, when we would have started in business, a fax was an enormous thing. My God, you can send a page to someone else, and look how quickly things have changed there. So don't not be a bit imaginative about what the future might hold, and goodness gracious me, don't forget about what part of the world we're connected to, but don't just think about obvious ways of getting to those markets. There are other ways to get there. Collaborations, not just they're going to give it to us. What about if we work with them? Maybe in 30 years, when my nephews and nieces might be working, we might all be speaking Mandarin, I don't know. Or we might have a language that's a hybrid language, I'm sure that there's going to be that there, so don't forget about those opportunities. The age-old argument that's been going on again for about 20 years about this region is the population. When are we ever going to get to that million that a lot of the demographers say is the tipping point when cities get taken seriously? According to some of the estimations that you've got for your case study, we're not going to be there yet. So let's think about that. Maybe we need to think about the paradigm of what this region is. This region goes all the way from the Central Coast, if you think about it, all the way up to the North Coast and inland. So it's a very connected region. The Central Coast maybe doesn't think it's Newcastle and they don't like the Hunter, but I think they're more likely to coalesce and collaborate with us than perhaps they might with the north of Sydney or the city of Sydney. So maybe there's some things we need to think about there. Jobs growth, I think we need to think about the sectors that we've got, about collaboration. And when I look at the project brief proper, these are the words that stand out to me: idea, export, global, feasible, teamwork, leadership, creativity, innovation and brilliance. That's what the judges are looking for. All right, and you haven't got much time to get that together. But just think, if I can say anything that I've done, we run a course at the Business Centre around innovation, and we've been immersing ourselves in this space for quite some time, the more I'm involved in it, the more I realise that you've got to create opportunities to collaborate with the least likely person who you might want to collaborate with. And by that I mean, if you're an engineer, if you're an educator, if you're an HR professional, if you're a person that works in manufacturing, please be in networks, professional networks or otherwise, that allow you to put your ideas to people that can give you a different perspective. Because it's just those perspectives that might be the element that allows something to tip over into something that could be realised. And the more and more I see that, and the more I read about innovation, very often it's those constructed accidents, not a WHS thing, but an accident of fate, of collaboration, that will often lead to the innovation. But you've got to have the skills, like some of the tools that we're talking about today, that allow you to capture an innovation when it occurs, to get it to market, to commercialise it, to advance it, to get people to collaborate with you. All right, you're about to go off and play with the value proposition for only a very short time, and you're going to work on the case study. So I think we've set a little bit of a scene about your project, that it's necessarily a bit fuzzy doing a project unless you define your project all the way down to we are creating a vehicle or a manufacturing plant or an industrial zone, whatever it might be. I think the nature of your project means it is going to be a bit fuzzy. So you need to convince people about what your proposition is. The why thing gets you all on the same page. I think if we've got a sense of why and the Simon Sinek, but you've got to stand out a little bit with your project. You've got competitors here, so how are you going to stand out? And how the judge is going to see that you've thought a little bit differently. You've considered the fundamentals and the task, but you have thought about standing out a little bit. How are you going to do that? This is where we look at the value proposition tools that I've given you there. So you need to understand what is our project, what jobs, don't mean what actual employment it creates, but what pains and what things is it going to do for the community or for the economy that we can demonstrate. What are the pain points at the moment? Are they likely to go away, or are they still going to be here? Maybe people in Watt Street think there's a particular pain point in this city at the moment. But that could be, if you extrapolate that further, people on the Central Coast or people in Lake Macquarie have pain points around employment, around community assets, around opportunities for commercial development. So think about the pain points. Think about the gains of your idea. So we know what the little bits and pieces our project's going to do. We know it's been addressing the pain from the customer perspective, and we know that we've got some things that are going to allow for some gains to occur because people adopt our idea. Then your business model canvas allows you to test and iterate. Now, a lot of you in manufacturing engineering will know what I'm talking about here. Get proximity of the product to the marketplace. Get version 1 to the market quick. Fail fast. So you need to iterate your idea by using the canvas. It's okay to test an idea all the way through, take it all off, scrap it. Test another idea, you refined it. Okay, take a photograph of it with the post-its on it, and you can come back to it as a good business model. It just wasn't quite right because you tested it on the assumptions you've made on one page and gone, that's not going to work. But we won't throw it all away. We'll start another business model. And you would have seen that from the videos that I got you to watch. Then you've got to get, and this is where Lloyd, who will be joining us soon, is going to talk to you about the concept of this pitch. Now, it's only a 5-minute pitch, but it's refining right down your project to a way that you can communicate what the essence of it is. You're going to go in about a minute. You're going to read the test case study that I've got you to do. I'm not going to get you to go right through and do all the slides here. But these are the things that you need to think about. You need to get together, what is the opportunity? What's your value proposition? What's the magic of your idea? The project you're going to come up with is an app. And you've got about 5 minutes to come up with how this app is going to work. And I'm going to give you about a minute to a minute and a half, just with some dot points to report back to Lloyd and myself about what you would do if you had all the resources, you had to create this app and you had to pitch the app, what would you say? What would you do? You with me? So value proposition is about jobs. It's about pain. It's about gain. There's some trigger questions there. I don't want you to do everything on the value proposition today with your project. It's another set of tools I've given you for your project. But I want you as an exercise today just to play around with a real idea and think about, how would I do this? If I had to come up with a solution on a small amount of time that I've got, what would I come up with in regards to this case study if I had to create an app where I got right through to the end point, where I was able to go to market and say, here's the projections, here's the metrics, here's the current status, this is what I want. You with me? Okay, I'm pushing you. We haven't got a lot of time, that's the nature of the way that we're working, but I want you to go back now, get the case study, talk it through, get some notes. You're going to be presenting in about 5 minutes. Brief presentation, go. So, I know that was busy and I know there wasn't enough time, but guess what? There's often not enough time, is there, to do stuff. I want, for each group, you've got a little bit of time now here to communicate back to me. What are you guys going to do with that task? You're a project team. You're going to come up with something to convince us. And I might get Lloyd just to have a little listen in on some of the feedback here, and then we'll go from there. And then I'll introduce Lloyd. He'll introduce himself. All right, we'll start here. I'm going to give you I might give you about a minute just to report back to us what you're going to do with this.
Okay.
Go.
So our scenario is that hospitals or hospital systems are losing a lot of valuable time and money.
Everyone's got the same scenario.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So just go.
All right. So the issue, the inefficiency is there's inefficiencies and inconsistencies in how things are run in the hospital. We understand that doctors are busy and they like to do things their own way. So we think that the app is all about a timetable for scheduling when things are going to happen and how they're going to happen. So the schedules need to be, we need to have similar setups in the same theatres. So you might have theatre A, B and C. So in theatre A you're going to have similar setups. They might be different procedures, but the setups are going to be specific to those doctors. And it'll be for a block of time, and using the same nurses to do that particular setup. So you're not having...
So how's your app going to work? What's it going to do?
It's going to schedule.
Is that it? Yep.
Schedule when the surgeries are going to be and what doctor's going to be in which theatre.
Okay.
But it's going to tell the nurses, okay, well nurse, you're going to set up in theatre A and you're going to do all the setups for that particular...
Okay, stop there. Next group.
Yeah, how long have we got?
Got a minute.
Okay. Do you have late operation? Buzzers on the edge?
Yes?
Bing? No good. You leave something behind, it's critical. We can't have that. You've got the wrong tools, we don't have that time. We've got backlogs, we got issues in the health game. People are waiting for knee surgeries, heart surgeries, critical surgeries, people are dying, it's sad, it's a big business, we need to get it right. These nurses, they know our doctors. These docs, they're pretty 5-star. They drive their BMWs, Mercedes, drive my Toyota, get in, my wife's been driving, seats in the wrong spot. The mirrors are in the wrong spot. I've got to change it. I'm late for work now. Same deal. We all know how it feels. The doctors don't know how it feels. They've got it all set up for it. The nurses have got the data. We're going to take the data and put it in the app. We're going to get some widgets, put them in all the tools. The tools will be tracked everywhere they go. The app will capture that and schedule all those operations for the day. It's going to take out all the stress from the poor old nurses.
Done. Nice. Next group. Next one. Ready? Go.
Taking it back to basics, the issue is with, I guess for us, that the doctors want different things. So how are you meant to know, how are you meant to keep across it? We're creating basically an app. Each theatre room will have an iPad that's permanently put in there. It'll have the schedule for the day, and basically the doctors are creating, the app has a doctor profile in the background. So each doctor will pop in what surgery they're doing and their equipment that's required, and then a visual of the layout of how it needs to be. So the check-in, check-out system is also good for, I guess, inventory management as well. So you can tick off that all of the equipment is available. You know exactly how it needs to look, and at the end of that, you're basically checking it back out. So the doctor profile basically accounts for the specifics. They know that they're getting what they need as well, and it basically means that anyone could come in and set that up.
Okay, time. Well done. One more. We got one more. We've got one more, haven't we? Yep. This is. You're a small group too. Just a very concentrated effort. Go.
So the app was going to reduce the cost of the procedure for both the surgeon and the patient, and I guess government and everything as well. I don't know how we're going to do it really, but we're going to give clear instructions to staff from the, I guess, link the app from the doctor to the staff so they have clear instructions straight off. I don't know, and yeah, just reduce wait times for operations. That's it.
That's cool. That's all right. Okay, well done. Now, I'm going to hand you over to someone who's going to tell you a little bit about this in a bit more depth and give you a sense of, well, that was a good idea. What happened next? So I'll just hand over to Lloyd. I'll get the PowerPoint up for you, Lloyd. Now, Lloyd is a friend of the Business Centre and someone that we've very much enjoyed working with. I'll just let you, when you want to start it, you might want to, because I think the second slide's automated, isn't it? So
Yes,
So I'll just let you
All right.
go when you need to go. I'll just hand over to Lloyd.
Hi, my name is Beth Wozniak. I'm a scrub nurse and co-founder of Scrub. During my first year of nursing, I was working in an operating theatre very similar to this one, and it was at this time that I was constantly being asked to go and gather equipment that should have been there in the first place. Scrub nurses would often yell the names of instruments as I ran down the hall to look for them, but I often didn't know what they looked like or where they were located. So I asked the question, does this only happen at this hospital, or does it happen everywhere? We have since realised that this happens worldwide. The pivotal moment for me was when a surgeon ripped off her gown and walked out of the operating theatre, leaving a patient asleep on the table. She did this because she was so frustrated with not having the right tools to safely complete her surgery. And that's when the idea for Scrub It came about. Hi, my name is Beth Wozniak. I'm a scrub nurse and founder of Scrub.
Thank you, Beth, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lloyd Davies, co-founder of Scrub It, and we are experts in using software to improve operating theatre processes. Now, that's a pretty scary story that Beth tells you there, isn't it? Well, I'm here to tell you how we can solve that problem. And I'd like to do that by telling you a little bit more about what the problem is, how Scrub It, the software, solves the problem, and I'd like to tell you about Scrub It, the business. So firstly, to the problem. This is a setup. It's all the items and instruments that a doctor requires in an operating theatre to perform a particular surgical procedure. Now, every doctor will use a different list of items for every type of procedure that they perform, and no two doctors will use the same list for the same procedure. Now, in order to do a setup, excuse me, how do you go back? There we go. In order to do a setup, a scrub nurse will grab a trolley, get the list of required items, and head off to all the storerooms that are located throughout the theatre suite, collecting all of those items. But there's a problem. And the problem is that the list of required items is a piece of paper. Now, this piece of paper is difficult for everybody to access, so when the doctor wants it updated, usually while he's doing the operation, no one can access it. So that very rarely gets done, and it's often wrong to start with. Secondly, the items listed on there don't have enough information for the person collecting the items to be able to accurately locate the items or to identify those items when they do locate them. But nonetheless, a scrub nurse will head off with this piece of paper. When they find something, they'll cross it off the list. If they can't locate it, they circle it. If it needs to be purchased in by procurement, they'll scribble a post-it note, stick it in their scrubs, and take it out to procurement later in the day if they remember, and hopefully procurement will order that item in time for the surgical procedure. This whole procedure then needs to be repeated prior to the surgery in order to complete the setup. So you can see it's chaotic and it's prone to error. And we know it creates error because we did a study of 100 operations and we found that 62 of those were missing required items at the commencement of the surgical procedure. And what this leads to is someone having to run from the operating theatre during the procedure with the patient asleep on the table to get that item. What we also discovered was 70% of the setups had items on them that didn't need to be there for that procedure. Now these are expensive pieces of sterile equipment, so once you open them, you have to throw them away. Current attempts to solve the problem are to use your experienced staff to do the setups, but because the setup list is wrong, the setup is still wrong. Also, because they can only do 1 or 2 setups at a time using pieces of paper, even they are taking way too long to get these things done. So you can see it's chaotic, it's manual, and it's prone to error. So how does Scrubbit solve this? Well, firstly, Scrubbit holds all of those required lists directly in the app for everybody to access and to keep up to date. But then what we do, we take every required list for a surgery day and put it into an easy-to-use checklist, multiple setups at a time. We show the user all the details of every item they need to collect. We show them the quantity required for every single setup that they're doing, and we show them the shortest route to take in order to complete that setup. Because the user's just ticking what they collect and crossing what they can't locate, Scrubbit knows the status of every single setup and is able to easily report out-of-stock information directly to procurement. Now, thanks to Scrubbit generating accurate setups, we've been able to reduce the time that staff need to spend out of the operating theatre collecting those missing items. We've reduced the procurement costs of your typical hospital in Australia by over $160,000 per annum, and we've increased staff satisfaction because the doctors and nurses have the items available to them to do their job. In fact, in the words of one nurse unit manager, Scrubbit has revolutionised the theatre setup process. So that's our solution. Let me tell you about our business. Scrubbit brings together experience with business management, experience in enterprise resource planning software. We have a great deal of in-theatre experience around the setup process, and we've got gun software development skills on board. And with this product, we won the Healthcare HESTA 2017 Award for Innovation for Scrubbit. We're selling Scrubbit as software as a service, charging a per month, per theatre fee for the software. We currently have 8 theatres running Scrubbit, and that has a potential for another 114 theatres. We also have a signature for another 5 theatres, and that opens up another 300 theatres through that pilot system. But what we've discovered is the medical suppliers that supply the equipment that go on these setup lists have a supply chain problem, and Scrubbit solves that problem. So of course we're talking to them about how we can work together to the benefit of our mutual customers. So you can see that there is a large problem in the operating theatre, and we have both the software and the team put together to solve this problem. Scrubbit ensures accuracy and efficiency in operating theatre processes, and this results in improved patient safety, time and cost savings, and overall stakeholder satisfaction. Scrubbit, accurate surgical setups every time.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. I didn't want to do a presentation today without connecting to something that you could see that was an actual business, that used some methodologies that we adopt and promote at the Business Centre, but also an example of a local entrepreneur, an innovator, that you could easily see how clearly articulated the message was on the product and the value, and towards the end of the presentation that was really crystallised succinctly. So I'd just like to thank Lloyd so much for his kindness in offering his time to come here today. And I'd also like to open up if anyone's got any questions, or if Lloyd you'd like to add anything about your journey and your iteration of how you presented your product, and perhaps just a bit of background on yourself as well.
Sure.
And I'm sure
there
could be some questions.
Start there and
perhaps
we'll cover stuff.
that might start off.
I could talk about this forever, by the way.
How did the three come together? So you've got yourself, the nurse, or the surgeon,
Yep.
and
The developer.
software developer.
Yeah. So Paul used to work for me, software developer. So he and I met about 10 years ago. I was his first employer and his only employer. So now he's employing himself. And Beth's mother and I built software for the disability services industry starting maybe 15 years ago now. And when Beth had the idea for this, we were hooked up together to discuss it, yeah.
Is there opportunities to further automate it?
There is, absolutely. What would be the obvious thing you'd do?
Well, you just have it all pre-packaged and it's just there's no human running around.
Yep. Yep, and what's the other thing we could do to improve the process and accuracy of it?
Order straight from suppliers?
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking more scanning or something like that, so you know what you're collecting is correct. And you hit on the other one. So to hit yours first, the medical supply companies do that, and that's what we can solve for them. Because currently, it's very difficult for them to sell that product of operation in a box when they don't know what needs to go in the box, because the current list of what needs to...
When you know what has to go in it to when they can put it together or whatever?
They can preempt that. They know how many surgeries the doctor does. So they can create these, what are called custom packs. And what you can do with Scrub It is you can look at all the preference cards you've got in the system and say, okay, there's 50 items on each one. If we put together a pack of 20 items, that covers 40% of all of our preference cards. So just put those 20 items in a pack, and that's 20 items down to one for a collection point. Okay, so that reduces a lot of error. So you can do that as well, and that makes, you know, that pack is a lot cheaper to buy than the 20 items that are in it.
And what sort of dollars are you talking about to be in all the instruments in one pack?
Oh, look, it depends on what they are, and I'll be honest, I don't know.
Is it like hundreds or less?
Oh, thousands of dollars, yeah. Yeah, thousands of dollars. So the other thing is scanning. And this is really important with regards to what you've been doing, because we've done all that too. So it's good to see you learning it. Our first iteration of this product had barcode scanning in it, and we use barcode scanning because that exists in the theatres. Like, they've got barcodes on the shelves, so we put barcodes on the setup list as well. So the idea was you scan off the shelf and you scan onto the setup. So we went in, and the first day of testing we did, it didn't work. Well, it worked great, but the user it just slowed them down way too much. They're used to using a piece of paper and having that full visibility of what they're doing. And what we gave them, it's like going shopping and saying, okay, go and get carrots. Go get carrots, got carrots. Now go and get zucchini, go and get zucchini. You don't work like that. You want to know, even though it's the same order, you just want to know where you are. So overnight, and that's where it's good to have development skills on board, we ripped out the scanning, made it a simple to use checklist where you just tick or cross what you've got. And the next day, when we finished the first room, the woman said to me, I'm all right, you can go. And it just worked. But the scanning, I still want to put it back in some fashion. We need to be a bit smarter about how we do it, whether we RFID or something like that. And I've got a few connections that I've made on the journey we're on that have seen the same opportunity with us. Internet of Light people as well are looking at it. So I want to bring it back in for more accuracy, but scanning wasn't the way to go. So we just ripped it out. We were wrong.
Is it plan to go overseas?
Yeah. Our intel is that there's nothing in America, and we can't find anything worldwide other than preference cards in the cloud. So essentially it's like Google Docs, really. Just put all these documents in the cloud and everybody can access them. That's pretty much what they're doing. No one's doing the extent to which we've taken it to being it's really a pick and put away system.
How long have you been running?
We started over 12 months ago. So our journey was, Beth had the idea several years ago, then maybe 18 months ago we started talking about it. We started seriously building a bit over 12 months ago. We sort of launched the pilot. So we've been doing this at Maitland Private Hospital, and we launched the pilot in November there last year and worked on that through to December. They've been using it ever since. In the start of December, we pitched for and got into the Slingshot program, HCF Catalyst 2, and we ran that in February, March and April this year, I think, 3 months in Sydney doing the Slingshot program. We've come out of that and we've just been working on it ever since.
Is this stuff like patent protection kind of stuff? Do you have that kind of stuff? Or?
There's nothing you can protect here other than the code.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Surely there must be something that you can...
We haven't invented anything particularly, you know. It's like, you know, essentially like Facebook, they haven't really invented anything. There's no new technology. They're not curing cancer or anything. You can build it. You just can't use their code to do it. So
how do you, I guess, how are you going to start the front foot?
Yeah. So a couple of things. Get to be the first. There's other products out there. We think we've got a superior product, but we also have asked. So the way, and this is a good idea, like if you've got a good idea, you think it's a good idea, and you'll think that to your dying day. It may not be a good idea, right? So go and ask people. So whenever I've engaged with hospitals or private hospital groups, I've asked, you know, have you seen our competitors? Yes. What do you think of us compared to them? I just ask them. So we think we've got a superior product in that case. We've got a few advantages. One of our big advantages is having development skills on board, so it doesn't cost us anything to iterate and change. We're very, very nimble in that respect, and that's holding some of our competitors back, which is good for us. Also, a few of our competitors, and it was interesting to hear one of you say about the doctors. So our competitors have slightly different models. One uses like a template model where you download a template for a knee operation. Another one uses the idea that the doctors log in and set up the preference cards. Our experience and our research around that, first of all, templates don't work because two doctors doing the same operation will have like 5 items that are the same. They'll both use sutures, but they use different sutures. They both use scissors, they use different scissors. Think about it. One's left-handed, one's right-handed. One's a man, one's a woman. They're different sized people. So they're different, they're completely different. So I don't know how a template works, and that's not getting a great deal of traction. Another one is where the doctor sets it up. The doctor's level of care around the setup is that it has to be perfect when they walk in the room, and that's where it ends. They don't care how that happens. This can be the first time they've ever walked into that hospital, so the first time they've ever worked with these staff, this staff, and it should be perfect. Because behind the scenes, everybody's running around after the doctor, sending in the notes, so the rooms of that doctor will contact Newcastle Private and say, can we get their preference card set over to Maitland Private? So they'll send them over and they're the Word documents. They don't match Maitland Private, but some poor scrub nurse in the week before will try and match what's on this list and ring the rooms and say, what do you want? And get it right. And the doctor walks in and goes, right, oh, they're in the wrong order. I need them round the other way. Because I'm not watching, I'm just picking up. I'm working like this, like a, you know. So that's their level of care. So we kind of believe that model doesn't work either. So, we've been asked, can doctors log in and do stuff? And we said, yeah, sure. Yeah, we can create their security portal for it, but I don't think they'll use it. So yeah, so there's a few different iterations to our competitors as well that you've got to keep an eye on.
I guess once you're in to a hospital, the likelihood of you getting knocked out.
It's pretty sticky. Yeah. And that's one reason we sort of went with the SaaS model as well, because as a startup, you know, initially it doesn't help us much. You're not making much money off your first couple of deals. Whereas if we sold it for 150 grand, it'd be like, okay, great. But then in 5 years' time, hopefully we'll just have a guaranteed revenue, per monthly revenue, a couple of $1 million coming in, and you know, we can either put people in charge of the business, or we can sell it to J&J or one of the suppliers, or you know. And this is the other thing: the data we're collecting is really important, because we know what doctors use. No one else knows that. No one else knows that, other than the procurement people. But even that's not 100%. So we can actually tell these surgical supply companies, and we're talking, you know, $1 million contracts with hospitals. We can tell them what they use. Guess what? You know, if you can reduce the price of that item, you're going to save them. So go in and sell that. You know, so there's value all over the place with the data we've got as well.
So would a doctor typically use the same exact instruments for the type of operation he does?
Yep. Yep. Every time.
I think that was the major challenge we were facing, is that we had no idea what like the environment was like and what the requirements were for that.
Yeah, yeah. So just to relate back to what you're doing there, so we did the same thing. Slingshot used that same thing. Day one is doing that at Slingshot. All the cohort that went in, we all go in and we all do that, and pretty much I'd guarantee everybody leaves that day having got, you get into Slingshot and you think, right, you made it, first of all. You got nothing yet. And secondly, you've got your idea, like I said, and you're attached to it, and you've been working on it already, and you've got a bit of traction maybe, and maybe even making some revenue. And you go and do that, and you all walk out going, right, we've got to chuck that out, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. And you've got to keep doing that all the time, absolutely all the time. And you've got to be open to, that change. You can't be attached. So with regards to the pivoting thing on those, I use that in everything I do now. Absolutely everything I do, and I even use it with my kids, and they hate it. So anything I do, I'm just testing. I'm just seeing if it works. I don't care if it works or not. I just try something, and if it doesn't work, I change it, and if it works, I improve it. And that might be how I deal with my kids, how I teach them how to kick a ball or swim or anything. It doesn't matter what I try, as long as I don't pretend I'm right and just change it. And it makes such a difference in your life. You're actually happier. It's a bit weird. You're actually happier because you're never wrong. You know? Because you're just testing stuff, and if it works or not, you go, oh, that's the outcome I wanted. I wanted it to work or not. So guess what? I was right. So I'm always right now. So, and it's a really good way to be, and it's a really good way to be in your business. So don't get too attached to things, and you know, you can probably see in the places you work, you know, people get attached to a way to do something, and it's not working, and it might be a good idea, and you just haven't got the right personnel. Stop, you know, just change it. You know, have a look at what you're doing. Persistence is great, but pivoting is
Lloyd, we had a conversation earlier this week about something you maybe thought you'd mentioned today about people being inside corporations or inside organisations, and how they might connect or respond to people who can help.
Yeah, so I thought I'd take the opportunity as future leaders in front of me, as well as I assume a lot of you work in corporations. I see a few Legos around. So we're doing a deployment now at a hospital, and the process to get in there was extremely successful at every step. He's one of the guys, I met the IT guy in Melbourne. He said to me, have you seen your competition? And I jokingly went, I haven't had a demo. And he went, well, I have, and yours is awesome. This is brilliant. Congratulations for this. So that's where we started with this company at the head office level. And that was the approach given to us at every step of the approval process. It took 6 months. Still, with that attitude towards us of, yeah, this is great. It took 6 months. From when we saw the scrub nurse and she said, can you come back later today and get started? We are desperate for this. It took 6 months. And that's because corporates have meetings and make decisions and then go on holidays. The amount of people on holidays when I need them. So what I wanted to say to you, if you are a leader and you want to be innovative within a corporation, act quickly. Don't think, okay, this guy came in, he had this great idea. This guy is me, I have a mortgage to pay, and I'm not making any money, and I am desperate. So I'm going to go out and sell it to anybody that wants to take it first. So don't go sitting on that idea and think, oh, you know, it seemed like a really good idea, I think we could do something with that, but I'm going on holidays. Actually take some action, and when they email you, take some action. on that, because the delay in between can kill startups, absolutely kill them, especially with us where we're B2B with large hospitals. Yeah, that delay in any action can kill off a startup. They just can't continue to exist, because these are people that they're working for nothing. They're putting all their savings into whatever they're doing, and there's only a certain period of time they can do that for, usually until their wife says that's enough. So yeah, I just reiterate that. You can make a big difference in innovation and in the startup world, even if you're in a corporate, and that's just by taking action.
Have you pursued any funding?
We got funding with Slingshots. We got some seed funding with them, which we're still using just for things like, you know, some software we need and rent and things like that. We use some on PR. We haven't paid any wages out of it, but yeah. So where we are on the funding thing, this is another, we're just going back and forth. Do we get funding? Do we not get funding? Or do we get investment? We're not at a point right now. We're kind of on the cusp of a couple of things. So if we were to get investment right now, we'd have to give away a lot more for a lot less. And that's where traction in what you do is really, really important. If you can get traction and proven traction, and that can take all sorts of forms. So what we're doing is we're approved for youth. There's 3 large health groups in Australia. There's Ramsay. We're going through the approval process for them to start a pilot with them. There's HealthScope. We've got the approval process with them. And there's Healthy Care. We won their award and we're talking to them. If we can get all 3 to accept us, just as, you know, yeah, tick the box, that's 6 to 12 months of an investor's money not wasted on waiting or trying to make that happen. So suddenly we're much more attractive. And that's all it can take is, right, okay, so you've been approved in those 3. So really all you need is some sales money and you're off. You know, the rest is done. We're also talking to the surgical supply companies about how to do it. And to talk on iteration, this is this week actually probably yesterday. You know, what do you do with this business? There's a couple of things we've got to do. We've got to sell the product, we've got to build the product, and we've got to deploy and support the product. We're seriously considering outsourcing 2 of those things. So Scrub It may be the 3 of us in Newcastle. Someone else is deploying it and supporting it, and someone else is selling it on our behalf. But we just do what we do. There's good money to be made there, and we don't have to I don't have to manage a team of 20 to 30 people, you know, and all the problems that go with it. But that's now, and that's because the particular opportunities come up, and it's something attractive to me. So everything changes, not just the product, how you run the business, what you want it to look like, all of that sort of stuff.
What's the average time to develop an app? Oh, yeah. Obviously, every app has different sort of...
yeah, look, it does. And the thing about the world we live in, and especially when it comes to apps, is that you might build an app that does one thing, and the one thing it does is 80% of the need. So huge win. The next day, people are going, well, what else you got? So you've got to keep going. I mean, we've got 8 theatres running it, and we're just about to release a whole new interface version of it, which we've worked about a month on for 8 theatres. You kind of think, oh, if it was 50 theatres, it'd be all right. But you've got to keep moving because they're bored of what it looks like and how it operates, and there's things that need to be put in. So we've just got to you've got to keep moving.
So you have to have that constant support for any new items that a doctor might need, or like to add to that list of tools that they're using.
Oh, in the actual data of the app, the theatres look after that themselves. But when it comes to features, yeah.
They can add new.
Yeah, they can do it all themselves. Yeah, they don't need us.
You get a fair bit of feedback from them to say, oh, can it do this or can you change this?
Yeah, a bit mixed. That's something that's quite hard to get, and I don't think that's necessarily just where the industry we're in. These days, people will use something, or they just won't use it. They don't sort of, if everybody sort of put their hand up and said, and gave some constructive criticism, it'd be great. But some people just put up with stuff. You go in to help them do something and you see them doing something, you go, what are you doing it like that for? There's a button over here, and they go, oh, I didn't know that. 6 months they've been doing this, and you just go, oh, you drive me nuts. So, yeah, so you've got to actively go out and get that off them, and you've got to work out ways to do that. So one of the things which piggybacks on what you're doing there, is some of the skills to actually get that information out of people, to go and ask the right questions and get honest answers. That's not easy. And that's where you build have you guys done minimum viable product? MVP? That's the next step after what you're doing. So the minimum viable product is literally that. I worked with someone through this Canvas process. They saw me speak at a university event and approached me just for a coffee, so I had a coffee. And before that, I got them to fill out one of these, and when we met, we had a look at her idea around aged care. She had all these different ideas, and I said, right, you've got to pick one, just pick one. So she picked this process with regards to registering people into an aged care home. A lot of people need to be involved in that process, next of kin, lawyers, it's usually transfer of the house asset in, all these people need to be involved. And it's done quite in a fragmented way. So after our conversation, she was going away to create a Word document that had a checklist on it and recorded the names and email address and mobile phone number of everybody involved in the process. Behind the scenes, she'd already worked out for each answer what documents needed to go to who on that list, and then she was just going to set it all up using DocuSign. And in the background, you call it a concierge service. She does all the work manually, sets all the documents up, emails them out, and they come back through DocuSign. And once everything's done, she hands it back to the aged care facility. She's not building a single thing. She's writing a Word document. But that's her minimum viable product, because it proves that, first of all, people want this service, and second of all, she'll discover that what she thought it was is not what it was. So she's not spending any money on building an app. Eventually it'd be great, they sit there at a computer, fill in all the details, hit go, it creates the DocuSign, everything goes everywhere, it goes out for a week, comes back to the desktop and goes, bing, you're ready. Yeah, great. But no point doing that if people don't want it. So a Word document, print it off, fill it in, fax it to her if they have to, it doesn't matter, and then she'll do it all manually and see if it works. That's your minimum viable product. Get it out there.
I think that's a good note. Thanks very much, Lloyd.
I told you I could talk forever on this.
Okay, we'll wrap it up there. I hope that gives you an insight into all the moving parts, and I think that was a wonderful note to finish on, the MVP. So your project, it has to have some viability at a minimum that you can convince the judges to engage with. So thank you so much for spending the time with you. I've really enjoyed it, and good luck with the rest of your time in the project.
Thank you, Steve.